Join us for the Criterion Institute podcast as Joy Anderson, a global thought leader in business and social change, leads us through a series of discussions, interviews, frameworks, rants, and reframes that will help you better understand how to use finance as a tool for transformative systems change.
I am Joy Anderson, and this is the Criterion Institute podcast. In this episode, the second one of 2025, I am reflecting on 4 possible futures of the field of gender lens investing. We've been doing a lot of this kind of analysis in preparation for our convergence gathering, which begins in just 3 weeks, and really thinking through how do we go into that gathering with some hypotheses so that we can come out of it with momentum and with people galvanized for action. So we've been having a lot of conversations, thinking about different angles on the field of gender lens investing and what's possible. Enjoy.
Join us next February for Criterion Convergence 21, Reimagining the Future of Gender Lens Investing. Convergence is Criterion's signature conference and a unique, deeply transformational experience that leads participants from framing to implementation over 4 weeks of structured conversation. Attended by global leaders from investing, government, and civil society, Convergence 21 will provide critical framing for anyone building more gender equitable futures. Let's reimagine those futures together. Find out more and get your ticket today at criterioninstitute.org.
Over the last couple months, I've been having dozens of conversations about gender lens investing. Where are we headed? What are the possibilities? But mostly, what are the extraordinary barriers? It started sort of an intense conversation over this last summer in 2024, continued through the 2X gathering in Kenya, at SOCAP in October. And then now, as we've been having conversations with people who are joining us for a convergence next month, just continuing to heighten a focus on what's really possible in the field of gender lens investing right now. Many of these conversations have been more discouraging than I'm accustomed to. Maybe I'm often the pixie of possibility in conversations saying, hey, maybe there's more possible. Guess what else we could do? But it's been sobering between the resistance to ESG investing in the United States, a recent ruling in Texas, again, punishing companies that are applying ESG considerations. This week is the week when Zuckerberg decided to follow Elon Musk into a land of bizarre misogyny. There's sort of an attack against diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And in a week, Trump will become president again. So it's a sobering time. I think if I'm in Africa, I'm hearing the extraordinary resistance to moving capital. I don't think it's always about moving capital to women entrepreneurs. It's just a general inertia in moving capital and so many questions that talk ourselves out of things. So it's just been a time of real roadblocks, barriers, not sort of a watershed of momentum that we were feeling maybe 5 years ago, where you sort of felt like there was a wave of support, more people willing to use their capital. So in moments like this, I'm always glad to be a historian, and I think I talk about this a lot, but I'm always glad to be a historian in these moments because you can sort of look back and look to the future. So I've been looking back a lot to sort of see where were we in, 15 years ago when we thought the field of gender lens investing was a great idea and that people would follow us. Part of that was the wealth transfer, and there was just a momentum of capital, particularly in the United States, moving with an awareness of a gender lens. And more governments integrating this into their development finance activities. So I can look in the past and say things used to be different. We used to see different potential. And so I want to look out to the future, because at some point, simply looking at where we are in this moment can get us stuck because it won't always be like this. That's sort of the only thing we know to be true, is what everything looks like today will be different in the future. So in getting ready for convergence, we always do a beginning section about framing. The first week is sort of, how do we think about things? It's always, this is our 21st convergence, and in every single one, the first week has been, how do you even have a conversation about this? So for looking at reimagining the future of gender lens investing, we've been thinking about some possible futures. And so looking out 10 years, what are some possible futures of what gender lens investing could look like? And in some ways, we haven't been disciplined to make sure that these are mutually exclusive futures. I think there are actually many possibilities of the field that could live side by side, rather than saying there's just one future of the field of the gender lens investing. I actually think there might be multiple realities that exist simultaneously. But we've landed on 4 different takes on the future. And the first one is the one that I keep hearing over and over again, which is gender lens investing as a Venn diagram rather than a center. So that many investors are looking to move capital to, well, a range of issues. And you could say, well, maybe gender's just one of the issues, or gender equity or equality is one of the issues they're trying to move to. But more and more, what we hear is, let's think about gender as part of climate. Let's think about gender in how we look at healthcare. Let's think about this more as a Venn diagram where there's a range of different topics and gender overlaps with them. And yet there isn't as much of a core center. I was actually thinking about this in light of work that Christina Madden did here years ago, building out the metrics for the GIN. And at the time, she found it much more provocative, much more helpful to be able to see gender in housing than to have generic gender metrics. It's an interesting thing, right? You can sort of think about things like diversity and inclusion become these sort of generic things that are about gender versus how gender informs how we see climate, or how gender informs how we look at the future of agriculture. And so you're doing a gender analysis, but you're doing it as part of agriculture. So this sort of looking at gender lens investing as a Venn diagram, one of the challenges in this future is, what's the core? Is there something, do we even have a field of gender lens investing, or is it fully mainstreamed, right? That there's gender integrated into a set of other fields, but not necessarily a set of people who see themselves as gender lens investors. So that's the first possibility, sort of seeing the future as about a Venn diagram. The second future is potentially the most different, but could coexist. In this case, we're looking at minimum standards being mainstreamed. This is maybe the future that I am least bought into. I don't see the momentum right now, but things change, right? That's what we're talking about. Futures change. And there is a significant amount of effort to galvanize around minimum standards, right? We've got the work that's happening within 2X, which arguably is a little bit higher than the absolute minimum now as we're moving into certification. But Equileap, Edge, sort of looking for data sets that can inform public equities that are a kind of core data set that says, when you're doing gender lens investing, here's a core set of data that everybody can use. And again, that's a big push all the time, right? That it's not going to get mainstreamed if we don't have a core set of data. And so in this future, we've figured that out. And it's possible, right? It is in some ways the most similar to the success that we've had in climate, where you have a standard, a set of metrics, a set of data that become universally collected, whether that's diversity on boards, which is increasingly universally collected, diversity in a workforce, things like retention, other pieces that are really about gender, but are the minimum standards in looking at gender. So the third option goes in a somewhat different direction, which is, and again, maybe the minimum standards is there to a certain extent. Maybe the Venn diagram also exists at the same time. But this talks about really niches of deeper impact. I see this in agriculture really clearly, a kind of emerging future where a set of people are looking at the intersection of climate and gender and agriculture and really looking deeply at questions of impact. I, I think the niche impact, right? So not all companies, not all, no, probably not even multinational corporations as some big standard, but niche areas where you can really see deeper impact on gender issues. I think in the care economy, there are some specific sectors where we're seeing differences as we look at things like women, peace, and security. This is an area where I think there's an extraordinary amount of gender expertise around women, peace, and security, and going deep in post-conflict financing of development, and a lens on women, peace, and security could really be groundbreaking. And so it's not everywhere, and it's not in all investments, but in this future, we're really looking at niche investments where there is a deeper case to be made. And I recently was talking to Jen Braswell around why it's so important to look at sectors and industries in particular, the sort of move away from generic gender data and being able to create more specific investment theses, more specific analysis, more specific risk, factoring of risk, because you're looking at an industry, you're looking at a country, you're looking not at a generic truth around gender, but rather specific niches. And so these three feel realistic, right? We can at least get to minimum standards. We can find some niches where we can have deeper impact. We can see gender as a Venn diagram overlapping with other things like climate that has much more momentum behind it and much more capital moving behind it. But we could be in a Venn diagram. The fourth one, though, is looking at a different realpolitik in the future to say, maybe we rebound from this current backlash that we're seeing in the rise of authoritarianism and sort of increased misogyny in the United States and some other countries, quite a few other countries. But instead of saying all of that resistance, which we're feeling every day, that all of that resistance carries on and we're sort of trying to carve out what we are most capable of doing. Don't dream too big, because really you've got a pretty substantial set of headwinds. But what if the headwinds become tailwinds? What if the wealth transfer, which is continuing, becomes a new set of momentum? What if the movement of younger investors, what if they start making more radical choices with their investors? What if some bigger institutional investors get past their ESG fears? Those could turn around as quickly as they came up, right? We could have tailwinds where we have headwinds. And in fact, you could take all of the movements that are pushing to shift resourcing of gender issues and social justice issues and have a resurgence of philanthropy in that area, which could fund movements, activities, data, and attempts to shift power more broadly. And then within that environment, it's kind of all three and more. What can we dream of doing? Going back to a time where we felt like, I do remember these times. Maybe I have a maybe I have a faulty memory where it all just sounds better in the past because today feels really hard. But I remember times where I feel like walking into Women Moving Millions, that you had a whole set of people who were moving with you. And so what if that comes back? Ellen Remmer's telling some remarkable stories, and Ruth Shaber of wealth at a local level organizing to do remarkably different things. We do have new data sets. We do have sort of extraordinary sophistication within the feminist movement overall, and looking at new kinds of analysis. Imagine if we had feminist tech funds that were really looking at the power dynamics in the platforms and figuring out, how do we ensure that we're extracting gender-based violence, and even more so, creating freedom from oppression. So 4 different possibilities. And the fourth one is maybe just a tonic for the soul at the moment, to imagine that 5 years from now, we might not be experiencing the same amount of headwinds, full resistance that I think we feel pretty often today. But it has changed in the past, and it will change again in the future. And so navigating these different futures, imagining what's possible, looking for systems opportunities, and being okay that we're making progress, being okay that we're still in the game, being okay that we're still asking these questions, and that more and more and more people are asking questions. And in some ways, the number of people who are responding to those questions with a unilateral no is because they heard that we were asking questions. It's no longer silent. So either way, today's pretty hard. And as fires burn in Los Angeles and we have conflicts around the world, today's hard from all kinds of different perspectives. And we need to plan for futures. We need to navigate the current reality to get to different futures, make our bets, and figure out how we make sure they pay off.
To learn more about our work, Visit us at criterioninstitute.org. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your reviews help our podcast reach a wider audience. Thanks for listening.